In this video, we're going to go over Chapter 6, which deals with graphing data using SAS Studio. For me to illustrate the different tasks that we're going to learn, I will be using a data set from the SAS Help library. I will be using the fish data set. We have a total of 7 columns. That means 7 variables: species, weight, length 1, 2, and 3, height and width, and a total of 159 observations. Okay. Now, species is a categorical variable, or character variable as we call it in SAS. And these other variables here, weight, length 2, 3, height, and width, are numeric variables. Okay. So first we're going to learn how to create a frequency bar chart for a character variable. Okay. So we already learned how to do that by going to statistics, one-way frequency table, right? So we learned that in last chapter, but here we're gonna focus more specifically on how to construct the bar graph or the bar chart without having to go through the statistic task that also gives us a frequency distribution. So we go here to tasks and utilities, go to graph. You see there are different types of graphs that you can create. We already learned, how to do a one-way frequency table that includes a bar graph, but here we're just going to look at the bar chart by itself. So let's say that I want a bar chart on species, because I want to see what percentages are of each species in this data set. For example, what percentage of the bream species, what percentage of the roach, what percentage of the whitefish. These are different fish species, I guess. Right? So I want to see the composition of my sample by percentages regarding to species. So I'll do a bar chart. Click there, bar chart. First you need to select your data set, right? Data set fish. Now you can have vertical or horizontal orientation to the chart. Let's do it vertical because that's the most common way of doing it. Now we want a bar chart for species, right? So we click that. Now you could choose to have the frequency, which is the count, on the y-axis, or perhaps the percentage. I'll say percentage is more informative in this case, right? So let's do that. And well, here if you click on appearance, you can show the labels, set color. If you click here on show labels, it will tell you, it will put the actual, in this case, percentage on the bar that for the category that you're dealing with. So you'll see now how it looks. Well, let's run this and see what we get. There you go. So as you can see, this is a pretty nice bar chart. We have 1 column per species, right? And since I click here on show labels under appearance, we get the percentages on top of each bar, which makes it, easier to read, or more, more useful for the reader. So as you can see here, 22% of the sample were bream, 6.9% were parkey, 35.2% were perch, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's how you get the bar chart. Now you could also do a bar chart, and in the y-axis, instead of having the percentage of each of those categories, you could have, let's say, the average width or the average weight for each of these categories. So you could have another variable here that is not the frequency or the percentage of frequency. Let's do that. I'm gonna show you, for example, here you can just, okay, so you have the species as your categories. Now here in measure you're gonna select variable. Now what variable do you want to use? Well, let's say the height. What statistic you want to have in the y-axis? Maybe the mean, which is the average, right? The average for the height for these types of fish. So if you run this, what are you gonna get? Well, for the different species, you will have the mean height. That's gonna be the height of the column will be the mean height for each of the species, and it shows what value, the value of the mean for each of the species, right? It looks like on average this type of fish has a bigger height. I mean, height for a fish, that's kind of like maybe length. I don't really know what this variable means in regards to these fishes here, but it's potentially just whatever number they're measuring, whatever measurement they're taking, you can find the average of it, right? You could also, instead of using height, there are other variables here, right? Let's say, okay, by species, variable, so let's say the width. Let's do that. You could want to have the mean. Usually you want to have the average or the mean for each of the categories in the y-axis. That's one of the most informative things. And well, let's run it again and see what we see now. Okay. So these are the average width for each of the species. Okay, so another thing that we could create here is a pie chart. What is a pie chart? Pie chart, you've probably seen it in many, online or in some books or publications. You start with a circle, which is your pie, and then you split that circle according to the different percentages. So for example, if I wanted to create a bar chart a pie chart for this data set with regard to species, one slice of the pie will correspond to bream, another to parkey, perch, pike, etc., etc., and those slices will be proportional to the percentage that I have in my sample. So we'll see how to do that. We can go to pie chart. We're using this dataset fish. Now, what variable are you going to use? Well, species in this case. We want to see the composition of our sample by species. You could use the frequency as your as the number that you will show in the bar chart, in the pie chart. But usually having the percentage is more informative. I usually like having the percentage better, right? Now, if we run that, you get a really nice pie chart. As you can see, we have 35.22% of our sample were perch, 10.69% of the sample was pike, and so on. Okay? If you put the mouse on top, it will tell you the actual number of counts. So there were 56 observations of perch, 17 observations of pike, and so on and so forth. So, and this is your pie chart, which you can, by the way, you can download it as a PDF. You see, and use it for your report. Now, another type of graph that we can create with SAS Studio is the scatter plot. Well, there are many that we can create, but the scatter plot is a very specific one. For example, let's say that you want to see whether there is some sort of relationship between width and height, the width and the height variables in this data set here that we have. Okay, so let me close this for a minute. For example, here in our data set, we have a column that is the height and a column that is the width. You may want to plot height versus width. That's what a scatter plot is. You're plotting these pairs, these x and y pairs, in an x and y coordinate system, and then with that, by doing that, you can see whether there is some sort of increase in relationship or decrease in relationship, or maybe there is no relationship. So the first step is always to create that, when you want to see whether there is a relationship between two numeric variables, is to create a scatter plot. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here, scatter plot. Click there. This is the data set that we're using. In the x-axis, you are going to have, let's say, the width. Why not? In the y-axis, you could have the height. So we're doing this for the whole data set. We're not differentiating by type of fish now. So it's just, an overall view. If you do that, click run, you see that there is some sort of increase in relationship. As x increases, as the width increases, the height also increases. This is an example of what we call in statistics positive correlation. Positive correlation. As x increases, y increases. You see, there is an increasing relationship. Now, it's kind of interesting that we have like two lines with different slopes here. So maybe, and just maybe, this is just my hypothesis. I don't really know whether this is true. One of these lines, one of this, this set of points here, this cluster of points, belongs to a different species than this one. So you may want to separate, or you may want to see whether, what different species you have here and here. So you may want to group or highlight in your plot the observations that belong to the different species, or to different groups. In this case, the species are the groups. So you could just click here and make species the grouping variable. So legend locate, there will be a legend because obviously you have to create different symbols or colors to distinguish the points that belong to one species and to the other one and to the other ones. So let's just run this and see what we get. Interesting, right? So these points up here are mostly from the bream and I'll say roach, perhaps. This is color coded. Now these points down here are mostly smelt, and here we have perch and hike. So there's a clear break between this. No, roach is red. So this looks like parky, right? Parky and bream. So the strength of the relationship is different, or the slope of the relationship is different for these two species compared to this other species here. It's interesting. So, there's so many things that you can discover by doing some little, graph and following and seeing what story the data is telling you.